Well, the EU has increasingly been more and more present in the everyday lives of all citizens, including obviously persons with disabilities. And since the inclusion of disability in the Amsterdam Treaty of 1997, we've seen how the EU has become more active on disability rights and disability policies. We can even see a progression from, for example, 1998, when they launched the parking card for persons with disabilities, and today, in which we are awaiting for the Commission to launch a new disability card, a European disability card, which we will ensure that there is mutual recognition of disability across member states, and this will facilitate the free movement of persons with disabilities. So we've seen how the EU has been paying more and more attention to persons with disabilities, and we can actually highlight the ratification of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities as a milestone on this kind of journey that the EU and all member states, because all of them have finally ratified the UNCRPD, how they've been more active on disability policies. We've seen how the EU has tackled certain aspects of non-discrimination and equality, such as, for example, the Equality and Employment Directive from 2000. We've seen how the EU funds, the budget of the EU, which have been also has been increasing in the past years, how it focuses as well on the inclusion of persons with disabilities, in supporting accessibility and non-discrimination, and in underpinning independent living of persons with disabilities in the community. We've seen as well how the EU, because of the strong competence that they have on internal market issues, has become active, a leading role actually worldwide on accessibility policies, with very important legislation such as the European Accessibility Act or the Web Accessibility Directive, focusing on the websites and mobile applications of public sectors, but also how the EU has also included accessibility in other sectorial legislation concerning audiovisual media services, concerning electronic communications, concerning rail infrastructure, buses, and so forth. The EU, because of free movement, which is one of the values of EU citizenship, has also worked on passengers' rights, for example, on the rail passengers' rights, which was recently revised and entered into force this year, and how to request assistance. This pre-notification has been reduced to 24 hours as a maximum. And in all of these changes, in all of these improvements and progress, the key factor has been the disability movement, the European disability movement, as a driving force behind all of these political changes and fulfillment of rights, which is we are not yet there yet. There are still many issues that we need to tackle at European level, in which the EU can have a stronger say and action on the rights of persons with disabilities. We see that there are still 28% of persons with disabilities which are at risk of poverty and social exclusion. There are many people with disabilities without jobs. There is a 20% gap between persons with and without disabilities in having employment. Half of persons with disabilities have felt discriminated in the past years. There are still over 1 million children and adults with disabilities who live in institutions, and there are still like humane practices against persons with disabilities, like forced sterilization or forced treatment, that are still a reality in many countries of the European Union. On political rights, for example, there are still 14 countries in which certain persons with disabilities are deprived the right to vote and the right to stand as candidates. So in all of these, the EDF, the European Disability Forum, with all our members, we keep on advocating for the advancement of persons with disabilities. So the EU really takes action to ensure that we have equal opportunities and non-discrimination. Well, actually, this manifesto was a collaborative activity that we carried out with all our members, with a broad consultation to all of them and also to all the participants of the Fifth European Parliament of Persons with Disabilities. And this manifesto will guide our campaign towards the European elections in 2024. And basically, it summarizes all the proposals that will be calling the candidates to become members of the European Parliament and the next Commission and member states in the Council of the EU to be taken into consideration in the years to come. So, as you can imagine, it's a very, very ambitious document with many proposals ranging from ensuring that persons with disabilities, regardless of their disability or their legal capacity, and regardless in the country they live in, they all have the right to vote and stand as candidates to the European election, which is not a reality yet. We also believe that in order to really live up to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the role of Commissioner for Equality, as we have now with Elena Dali, with the mandate to implement the CRPD, is necessary, but we also need further structures in the EU institutions to really take equality as a cross-cutting aspect that they need to take into consideration in all the Commission services. That's why we are proposing certain institutional changes. For example, the creation of a Director General in the Commission for Equality with all the human and financial resources to really carry out these tasks. Also, concerning other institutions, particularly the Council, we believe that even a bigger reform needs to take place by creating an equality configuration in the Council with all the ministers in charge of equality policies. So this really gets on the highest level possible of the political agenda of the EU. We also propose to create a European agency for accessibility, because recently the EU has adopted a robust set of legislation concerning accessibility. Therefore, given that accessibility is quite a technical matter, we believe that as we have for other areas in the EU, like medicines, chemistry, rails, and so forth, we have many different agencies. We believe that accessibility deserves a focused European agency that can really build the capacity of member states, industry, disability organization on implementing those accessibility policies that we've been adopting during the past years. We also call, which has been one of the main demands of the disability movement for many years, for the adoption of an ambitious European disability card. Again, this proposal aims at ensuring this mutual recognition of disability across the EU. So when you move to another member state, you can be recognized as having a disability, and you can access preferential treatment or discounts or the services that are put in place for persons with disabilities. We also want to go far in the passengers' rights, because still nowadays you can be denied of boarding in a plane because of disability. And we want to ensure that the EU works on this. So, for example, this practice of denied burden does not happen on the basis of disability, that the airline carriers treat our mobility equipment and assistive technology as they deserve, not just as luggage. So that requires a legal reform as well. We also call for the establishment of a funding line, which we name Disability, Employment and Skills Guarantee, to really boost the participation of persons with disabilities in the open labor market. We call for the prohibition of the practice of forced sterilization. At the moment, we are working on a directive on combating violence against women, in which we are including this demand. Obviously, we support very much our members in Ukraine and in the neighboring countries due to the consequences of the Russia's aggression to Ukraine, and the EU is very invested in helping Ukraine also in the reconstruction. So we want to ensure that the EU money that will be put in place to help Ukrainians actually support a more accessible and inclusive country with services in the community, and not, not institutionalized settings for persons with disabilities to live in segregation. So this applies obviously to all the funding that the EU has in its external actions as well. We also propose a legislation on assistive technology to ensure that regardless of the country in which you will live in, since we have this single internal market in the EU, there should be, we believe, a legislation ensuring the availability and affordability of assistive technologies for persons with disabilities. And we also want, in these big flagship policy objectives of the EU, to achieve the to undertake the green and the digital transition. We believe that accessibility and inclusion should be at the center as well of these policy challenges that will remain in the years to come.